Yo, what's good everyone? Today I'll be showing you an extremely powerful gambit that is guaranteed to boost your elo. Yeah, I'm not kidding. If you learn how to play this gambit correctly, you'll begin to absolutely obliterate your opponents. The best part is, anyone can learn to play it. It doesn't matter if you're 200 elo, 100 elo, or like 2500 elo. You can still play this opening slash gambit and still crush your opponent. So yeah, let's get into it.
Let's go!
Alright, in case you haven't read the title, this is called the Vienna Gambit. And it starts off with e4, e5, knight c3. This is called the Vienna game. And everything in here, I'm pretty sure, is to do with the Vienna game. You can't get out of it. So, the Vienna Gambit starts off after knight f6. Yes, black can play knight c6 or bishop g5, c5, sorry, or anything else, but this is just the gambit. However, if you want me to cover the other moves like knight c6, then just leave it in the comments and I'll try to cover it. But today I'm only going to look at the gambit. So the gambit starts after knight f6. This is called the Falkbeer defense, but you don't need to know that. And here we play f4. This is like a king's gambit, except it's the Vienna gambit. So what is the purpose of this move? Well, we're striking in the center, attacking the pawn, and black has a choice. He could take our pawn, he could defend his pawn, he can leave it there, or he can play the main line, which we will look at. So first, let's talk about what happens if black takes our pawn. I mean, it is a free pawn, right? Well, not really. If he takes our pawn, it's not good for black, because as you see, the evaluation bar goes up a bit, and that is because we play e5. You might be wondering, wait, what's so significant about this? We're just attacking his knight, he can just move it. Well, he can't really move it because all these squares are actually, he can't move to any of these squares. The only square he can move back to is here. He can't move to this square or this square because of our knight. He can't move to this square or that square because of our queen. And the funny thing is that lower elo levels, especially around like the 800 elo level, people actually blunder their knight by putting it there. I'm not kidding. I've actually had a few games like this back then, and you'll simply just take it. So the best move for black in this situation is to bring it back. But there's one other thing that they can do, and that is to bring their queen to e7, pinning your pawn. But that's not really that good for black because you'll simply play queen e2 unpinning, and it's still a threat. So now we know that they can't play this, and if they do play it, we'll just unpin. So they have to go back, and if they go back, it's perfect. They just wasted a move. And I know how tempted it is to try and get this pawn back by playing d4 or d3, but first we have to play knight f3. Why? Well, if we play d4, he could hit us with this nasty check, and the king is forced to move. Because let's show this like this. If we play d4, he hits us with this nasty check, and the king has to move because we can't play this because he takes, and then we take, and then he gets a free rook. So that is not an option. So instead of playing d4, we first play knight f3, blocking this check from the queen, and then black will usually continue with something like this, and then we can play d4, reinforce our center, and opening attack on the pawn. And that's basically the Vienna Gambit accepted, you can call it, even though that's not what it's called, but we can call it that for the meantime. Okay, so far we've learned that the Vienna Gambit starts with e4, e5, knight c3, and knight f6, and we play f4. If they take us, then it's not good, because this happens. Now we're going to dive a bit deeper into this. Now we've already discussed what happens after queen e7. Now we play queen e2, that's correct, and then after g8, we'll look at this, okay? Now remember we play knight f3, blocking this check by the queen, and after here, black may play a move like knight c6, trying to put more pressure on your pawn. They may even play d6, but it's basically in this order. Now we play d4. You almost always want to play d4 after the knight f3. There's very few circumstances where you don't, but most of the time you will play d4 after you play the knight f3 move. Now, if they play d6, you're not going to take. Not now, anyway. The reason why you're not going to take is there's no really need to. You don't want to help them develop, because if they take, you're just helping them develop the bishop. So you don't want to take. Instead, what you want to do, instead of taking, is to take this pawn over here. And they will probably take this. And if they take it, you still don't want to take back, or with the bishop, with the knight, or with the pawn itself, you just want to play queen e2, because now you're the one pinning their pawn. So now with this queen e2 move, this pawn, as we said, is pinned. So black will probably try to get out the pin with something like bishop e7. And now we just take the pawn with the knight. And they can't take because bishop takes and blah blah blah. They just can't take, and their knight is also under attack. And this is just a much better position for white. We have long castles, and after we long castle, our rook is placed right in line with the queen, and we might even get into some more trappy stuff here. Speaking of trappy lines, there is actually a trappy line with this that you may want to remember because you might actually get it. So after they take, you push, and they go back to g8, regular move, and now you play knight f3 to block. And remember how I said that they won't always play knight c6, they may play d6? Well, if they do play d6, you have a very, very interesting move here. The interesting move here is actually queen e2, which doesn't seem like it does much, but actually protects our pawn another way. And let's say he copies us and protects with his queen. This is not good, because let's see if you can find the move, and it is knight d5, threatening the queen. He will move it back here, or back there, doesn't matter. We take, threatening the fork, but if he takes, he has fallen for our trap, and now we take this pawn, attacking the queen with discover check from our queen, and next move, we win the queen. So that's what happens if he accepts the gambit. Remember, takes, we push, and he has to move back. We cover the check, and basically we're just winning because we have more development, and we can castle, and it's just gonna be a better game for us. Right, so we have learned that accepting the gambit is an awful idea, but the thing is, declining the gambit is also a bad idea. Why? Because there's a few ways they can decline it, but the worst way to decline it is with knight c6, and this is actually worse than accepting the gambit, because you will need to know this line. It's a bit of theory, but it's not that much. You take, and then they take, and the important move here is d4, and they will probably move their knight away. If they move it here, it hangs, and we'll look at that later. But if they move it there, we push the pawn to e5, and they're in the same position. And remember how I said if they move it here, it hangs a knight? Well, that's because this, and they have to move, and then we can take with the queen. So we learned that knight c6 is an awful way to decline the gambit. But what if they play d6? I mean, yes, this is a good move. It's actually not that bad. It's not as bad as knight c6. But the sad thing is their bishop gets blocked in, and either they have to fianchetto it, or they have to live with it, and it's just hard for black to get this bishop into the game. So against this, we don't want to take, because that'll just lead to an exchange and the bishop is free again. So what we do want to do is play knight f3, just get our second knight out. And now after this knight f3, they'll probably do some regular development, maybe with the pin, or just a regular knight move. I don't know. They'll probably do something normal. And now what you want to do is you want to decide where to place this bishop. A lot of the time in the Vienna, you will see the bishop being placed on c4. It's a very active square, as we've seen in the fried liver, and you may even have this idea in the Vienna. So that's not a bad option, but you might even want to pin the knight, because pinning the knight puts pressure onto this pawn, threatening to remove a defender. So there's not much crazy stuff if this happens. It is a boring line, but you're slightly better here. One more really bad way to decline the gambit is with the bishop. This is not as bad as the knight, but still pretty bad, because in this occasion we actually do want to take the pawn, and we're threatening the knight and the bishop, so the most logical move is to take. But now we play d4 again, threatening their bishop once again, and if they move their bishop, we're gonna hit them with this, and it's the same thing again. So basically they need to do what's called a desperado and take, and then we just win a piece again like this. So you're completely winning. Alright, so we've looked at accepting the gambit, and we've learned why it's bad, because the knight gets kicked away. We've also looked at declining in a few ways, and they're all not that good. The best way is probably d6 to decline, but it does block in the bishop. But there is one actual good move for black, and if you know what you're doing, it's fine. It's not that scary, and it's a counter gambit. It's this. They play d5, gambiting this pawn while you're gambiting this, and this is what you do. So you don't take this pawn, you instead take this pawn, the e5 pawn. You take it, and they will take this. That's the main line. They'll take, and what I recommend here is playing queen f3. This is called the Paulson attack, and basically you are attacking this knight in two ways. So you're threatening to take, and when he takes with the pawn, you're threatening to take with the queen. The most common move you will see is knight takes knight on c3. Now, it is very tempting to take with the queen, but you actually want to take with the b pawn, taking towards the center, and your goal here is to go d4. Because this helps rebuild the center. See, this move actually kind of helps you a bit, because it helps to rebuild the center, and all your pawns are in dark squares, and it's a really nice pawn chain and structure. So they're not actually damaging your pawn structure with that. So in this position, let's say they play a move like bishop e7, something like that. You will play d4, like we mentioned, and they're probably gonna castle, so like this. And here's the plan: you want your bishop to go to d3, because since all the pawns are on dark squares, this bishop is gonna have a lot of mobility. This bishop you may even want to trade off. The next thing you want to do is you want to develop your knight to f4. It loves to go to f4. And you might be wondering, wait, how is it going to go to f4? It's not possible. Well, this is what you do. It goes to f4 either by e2 or h3. It sometimes may even go to g3 via e2, like this. The point is, you want your knight in the center, but since the queen is blocking its path, it has to go through e2 and so on. Alright, so now you know how to play the Vienna Gambit. Remember, just practice it. Let's go over it one more time. So e4, e5, knight c3, and knight f6 is the Falkbeer defense, but remember, you don't need to know the name. We play f4. Do you know what happens when they take? That's right, when they take, we push, and then they have to go back. It's the best move. Right, can you remember what happens when they defend? Well, if they defend with the knight, we do this, 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 and when they move, we do this, and it's the same position. Okay, you gotta know this. If they defend with the bishop, same thing. We go there, there, push with the d pawn, and it's basically just destructive for black. Their best move is probably a desperado, and their bishop's also under attack. And if they play with d6, then their bishop gets blocked in, and you just play the knight f3, just getting your pieces out to c4, and maybe you could even go for a fried liver. It's like in a Vienna, which is quite cool. And last but not least, the main line, like this. Remember, you take this pawn, and then they take your e pawn, and then you play queen f3. Don't take this knight. We play queen f3. They take our knight, and don't take with the queen. We take with the b pawn. And let's say regular developing move like bishop e7, d4. This nice structure, and our plan is simple: bishop d3. Maybe get the bishop somewhere to these squares. Knight e2, and you also want a castle. Obviously, I did not cover every single thing. If you want me to cover what happens after this move, or maybe even this move, just leave it in the comments and I'll try to cover it. I know I haven't covered every single last detail. You may want to check out a course, or you may want to check out some videos. I'll leave some videos in the description if you want to look at them. But yeah, this is a very nice opening for white, and you will get some elo with this, because especially even at the 1500 level, or yeah, about the 1500 level, no one actually knows what to do. Most people don't know the main line, or how to even play it correctly. So yeah, anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you next time.